Question 1, this was done well by nearly everyone. So 20% of 320. Please use a green pen for any corrections. So 10% is going to be 320 divided by 10, which is 32. So 20% is just 2 lots of that. So that's 64. Nearly everyone got that one right. Now the next one, I think that some people just didn't understand the meaning of these terms. So linear means it's going up in equal amounts. Geometric means you're multiplying by it as the same number repeatedly. So, so it's being multiplied by the same number each time. Fibonacci is when you add the two previous numbers to get the next one. And quadratic sequence is something to do with the square. So this one's geometric because between each two, we can see that it's being multiplied by 2 each time. It's not going up in an even way, in a linear way. It's being multiplied by 2 each time, and that's called a geometric sequence. So that was just understanding that terminology. (0.2 times 0.4). I mean, the easiest way, which I suspect you've learned, is to do 2 times 4, which is 8, and then to count up the amount of digits after decimal points in the whole calculation. So that's 1, 2, which means that I need to divide by 100 or shift all the digits 2 spaces. So it's going to end up as 0.08. Solving an equation. So I might expand the brackets here first. So 4 times 3x is going to give me 12x. 4 times 2 is going to give me 8, and that is equal to 14. Then take away 8 from both sides. That's going to give me 12x is equal to 14 take away 8, which is 6. Divide by 12. So 6 divided by 12 is a half, or 0.5. Right, a little bit of sort of problem solving with this one. And I would just do a little bit of trial and error to work this out. So with these fractions ordered from largest to smallest, which number could replace both in the question mark? So this one, 11 over 4. If I put 1 in, this would go 11 over 4. Right, what is 11 over 4 is the same as, right, 4, 8, 2 wholes, and doesn't quite fit in 3, and 3/4. If I put 1 in here, this would be 5 divided by 1, which is 5. So that can't work. Yeah, because it would be going up, and I know that should be going down. It would be going up here if we went from 2 3/4 to 5 over 1. It would be going up. So I need to look at 2. And I would just go through them like this. So let's think about 2. 2 3/4 is this one. Then 5, if it was 5 over 2, that's the same as 2 wholes and a half. Well, that is going down so far. The next one is just 1/3. And the next one, if this was a 2, it would be 2/9. Is 2/9 less than 1/3? Yes, it is, because 1/3 is the same as 3/9. So I can see that 2 works, and I would then select 2. If 2 didn't work, I'd go on and have a look at 3. But I know that 2 does work. That's going to be fine. Right, simplify the following. This is just a quick indices rule. So 3 squared times 3 to the power 3. If I have the same base and I've got these exponents and I'm multiplying, then I'm going to add the indices. Why? Because 3 squared is 3 times 3, and 3 cubed is 3 times 3 times 3. So you see the whole thing is just 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, or 3 to the power 5. Again, most people did get that one right. Right, this one caused confusion, and I'll try to explain it clearly. So there was not that many correct answers to this question 7. Okay, here's the key thing, guys. All of these ones are irrelevant. Why? Because they're not parallel. These two lines are the parallel lines. This one, all of these ones are totally irrelevant. You can't tell anything about them because it doesn't say that because these two are the ones which are parallel lines. This one because it doesn't have an arrow on it, it's not parallel. So I can ignore all these ones. So C and G, that's definitely out of the picture. Even though they look like they're corresponding, that one is not parallel to that one. So they're not corresponding. C and K, oh yeah, they're in the same position relative, so that one's the correct one. D and J, they're not in the same corresponding position. And B and F, well, that's part of the irrelevant one. So even though those look to be corresponding, they are not, because this whole thing is not parallel. It's not on a parallel line. So they're irrelevant. Okay, two different numbers are equal to 4.37 to 2 decimal places. The numbers could be 4.3708. Does that round to 2 decimal places? Yes, it does. And does it round to 4.37 to 2 decimal places? It does. And 4.3651. This also rounds to 4.37 because the number after this 6 is 5 or more. So that's going to round up to 4.37. So this one works. And you could go through the others, but this is the only one that does work. Right, next one, a lot of people got wrong. X to the 5 over x to the 2 times x to the 3. The other thing about multiple choice questions, guys, when you're doing your GCSE exams, there's about 10 questions or so, maybe slightly less, maybe 8 questions per paper, which is a multiple choice. That doesn't mean you're just going to select one. It means you're going to do some working out before you select it, right? Don't just think, because it's a multiple choice, I can just select one. So I'm going to do a little bit of working out first. I'm going to look at this part here. X to the 2 times x to the 3, you should know, is x to the 5, right? Because of that index law. So I've got x to the 5 divided by x to the 5. Now, when I'm dividing with powers, then I'm just going to subtract. So I've got x to the 5 minus 5, or x to the 0. So my answer is just 1, because anything to the power 0 is 1. And another way you can think about this is if you have a number and you divide by that same number, x to the power 5 is a number, you divide by the same number, that's always going to be 1. Like 12 divided by 12 is 1, or 137 divided by 137 is 1. If you're dividing by the same number, your answer is going to be 1. Or you could use your index law. This one was interesting, right? How can I work out the square root of 2 to the 4 times 7 squared? Well, let's just write out what that is. That's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 7 times 7. So if I think about what a square root is, it's what numbers multiplied by itself gives you gives you, so what is the number which when multiplied by itself gives me 784? Well, I know what 784 is, it's all this. Now, can I break this down into two numbers that are the same? Yes, I can. 2 times 2 times 7, because I've got my rule of commutativity, so that could be that would be one number. Commutativity is when I can multiply or add in whichever order I like. So that's 2 times 2 times 7 times 2 times 2 times 7. So each of these are 2 squared times 7 to the power 1. So it's this one. Okay, because it's the same number multiplied by itself. Okay, last questions on the first page, 11 and 12. 3.12 divided by 0.6. So if I've got 3.12 divided by 0.6, if I put that as over 0.6, which is the same thing as a division, I can then use 31.2 divided by 6. It's an equivalent fraction. I'm just timesing by 10 top and bottom, and that then gives me a whole number to divide with. So I can then do that as a little bus stop with the whole number outside. So I got 31.2. 6 goes into 3, not at all. 6 goes into 31 5 times. 1's remaining. 6 goes into 12 twice. 5.2. Right, median. Easy marks this if you just remember. And a key note for yourself is to order first and then find the middle. Be careful when you're ordering we're going to cross off as we go. So what's the lowest number here? 2. Another 2. A 3. 2 4s. A 6. Another 6. A 7. An 8. And a 10. So I'm just going to count to make sure I haven't missed any out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 numbers. Now the median is the middle one, but here I've got an even amount of numbers. So it's half. So the middle, I can't find it exactly. The middle is halfway between the 5th number and the 6th number here. If I crossed off from each side, I would end up needing the middle between there. So halfway between 4 and 6 is 5. Okay, we're going to move on to question 13 over the page. Okay, not many people got this one right. So the key thing here is to do some working out and first change it all to the same units, right? So let's make it all in. So I need 5 centimeters to 200 meters. But I can't just simplify that, because if I simplify that, I'll get 1 to 40. But I can't simplify that yet, because 200 meters is not in the same unit as 5 centimeters. So I've got to change this to centimeters. And I'm going to do that by timesing by 100, because there are 100 centimeters in each meter. So that's going to give me 2,000, or 20,000 centimeters to 5 centimeters. Now I've got it in the same units, I can now simplify it. So if I make this one 1, what I have to do? I have to divide this by 5. I'm going to divide this by 5. 20,000 divided by 5 is 4,000. So it's 1 to 4,000. So the key note for yourself is to make the units the same. Guys, I want to make sure that with green pen you're making a full correction. You're not just circling the right answer. That will not help you. Right, question 14. If 15% of a value is 75, what is 20% of the value? So 15% is 75. So this is what I would do. 15% equals 75. Now, to go up to 20%, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to 5% and then multiply it by 4. So if I divide this by 3, I can see that these both nicely divide by 3. So I know that 5% is 25, and then I can times that by 4 to get to 20% is 100. Just get the focus right and we'll move on. Okay, sharing a ratio, find the missing ratio. This is a little bit of a confusing question because it doesn't have an amount there given. I think the reason why it doesn't have an amount is because it's trying to sort of confuse you a little bit. If you shared and it was 160 to 120, then you must have shared £280. But that's not what the question is asking you. The question is asking you, what is the equivalent ratio here? So to go from 120 to 3, you would have to divide by 40. So to go from 160 here, I would also have to divide by 40. So it's the same as 4 to 3, and that's my missing ratio. So it's just a little bit confusingly worded. Right, this one, we need to put these out the same denominator, right? Doesn't matter that there's 3 of them, it's the same rule. So what's the lowest common multiple of 2, 9, and 3? So the lowest common multiple that I need to use here is 18, because that's the lowest common multiple of all 3 of these. 18 is the lowest common multiple of 2, 9, and 3. So I'm just going to, again, don't think you're just going to produce your answer. Be careful, be deliberate. Okay, so I've got, that was times by 9, so the top's times by 9. This is times by 2, so the top's times by 2. This is times by 6, so the top's times by 6. So I've got 9/18, take away 2/18, take away 6/18, which just leaves me with 1/18 left. Right, 9, 8, 7, and then 7 take away another 6/18, ends up with 1/18. Okay. So price P includes VAT. We use this pricing formula. P equals 1.2T plus 3.7. Find P when T equals 7. So whenever I have a substitution, I'm just going to do substitute it in with brackets. So T is 7. 1.2 times by 7 plus 3.7. Now, whatever way you want to do 1.2 times 7, you could do a little grid method. You know, you could, whatever way you want to do it. So you could do 1 times 7 is 7, and 0.2 times 7 is 1.4. So that gives me 8.4. So I've got 8.4 plus 3.7. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.1, 12 pounds 10. So it's 12.1 there, but we know if it's money, we're going to include the pence as well. One significant figure, question 18, just means the most important column. So the most important column is this one, the 10,000s column. So I need to round to the nearest 10,000. And that's 30,000. If it's one significant figure, it's just that first column that I need to be considering. Right, next one. What transformation? You've got a transformation along this line here. So, if you turn the paper, you know, that helps you see reflections because your eyes work left, right. But that's my reflection. Now, the equation of this line is y equals x. But y equals x is not the transformation. It's reflection in y equals x. Right, volume is 100. So volume of any prism is cross-section times by depth. So this is 20 times by the question mark, and that will equal 100. So that question mark must be 5 centimeters. 2/7 of a group of 42 students are boys. What would be a possible ratio of girls to boys? So if 2/7 are boys, 5/7 are girls. Now ratio works in terms of parts to parts. So I've got a total of 7 parts and 5 are girls. So the ratio of girls to boys must be 5 to 2. Because if there are 7 altogether, and there must be 5/7 that are girls, 2/7 that are boys, 5 parts to 2 parts. And it's that way round, because it says girls to boys. There are more girls than boys. This would be 5 to 2. This one, if I divide that by 1,000, I should either shift the decimal point 3 or shift all the digits 3, and I end up with 0.2365, and nearly everyone got that one right. This one was an ambiguous question in my view. It wasn't that clearly worded. There are some that it definitely couldn't be, and there are 2 that it could be, depending on how you interpret the question. So, it says shape K is translated twice to give shape L. Which of the following combinations would translate L to the given position? That's kind of confusing, because it could mean translate L back to K, or it could mean translate K to L. Which of these translates K to L? I think it's trying to say which 2 of these would translate K to L. But in which case, it would be this one, 1 minus 1, right? Because if I take any point here, and I go 1 minus 1, that would be there, and then no, that doesn't work at all, does it? That would be 2 minus 2, that would take that point to there, that wouldn't work. So it's very confusing, because I think it's actually meaning the reverse transformation from L back to K, which is kind of weird because of the way it's written, and which is why I think it's an ambiguous one. But if I take this point and I use this transformation, I'll be going minus 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then plus 3, 1, 2, 3. It would kind of be going to here, and then it would go 1 minus 1, and it would end up back at the correct place. So I believe this is the answer that was requested, but it's really confusing because of the way it's written. Right, with anything like this, I need to separate it into two shapes which I can work out the area of. So I'm going to separate it like that into a rectangle and a triangle. I'm going to fill in a couple of missing details as well. If that distance is 4, this distance must be 6. Remember, these are not drawn accurately. If that distance is 6 and that's 2, this must be 4. So my area there is 6 times 4, which is 24 meters squared. And my area here is 6 base times height divided by 2, which is 24 over 2, which is 12 meters squared. And I've got to add those up for the total area, 36 meters squared. Going to turn over, go on to question 25. Right. Now, question 25 through 30, not that many people got many of these. And they were quite tricky. And some of them you may not have particularly done much of. So don't worry too much about these, but I'll go through them. What I need to think here is that everything is shaded in unless, except for history. So, studied geography and didn't study history would only be this part here. It would not include the outside. Didn't study history is correct. Both A and D are correct. We know A isn't correct because A would not include this outside bit where people aren't studying geography. Studied geography or didn't study history. If you studied this would include this bit here. D would include this middle bit because it includes people who studied geography or they didn't study history. So the only difference between B and D would be that this bit would also be shaded in with D. Question 26. Find the nth term of this quadratic sequence. I mean, I don't think you guys have particularly done nth terms, so it's very tough for you finding the nth term of a quadratic sequence. I don't think you've covered that yet. So it's 3n squared minus 4. You could put some values in, and then check them. So the n value is the term number. So I mean you might do that. You might choose to do that as a way of working it out. And then just substitute the numbers in and see where you get to. I don't expect you to be able to work out nth term of a quadratic sequence yet, because I don't think you've been taught it. Question 27. Which number line represents 2x plus 1 is less than or equal to 5? So, with this one, you've got to just solve this as if it was an equation. So, if 2x plus 1 is less than or equal to 5, I'm just going to get a piece of paper. Then I'm going to work out this equation. So, therefore, if I take away 1 from both sides, I get 2x is less than or equal to 4. So, x is less than or equal to 2. So I'm just going to solve it as if it's an equation. It doesn't matter that it's an inequality. It's the same linear equation solving. And then I need to just check which one of these fits. Well, these are the two which have got something to do with 2, so I'm really looking at these two. And then this one is just 2 itself, and that's not right. It's not x equals 2. It's anything less than 2 or equal to it, so my answer is D. Right, 100 blue sheep and 90 yellow sheep are tested for a disease. Okay, so I think these are the blue sheep. And these are the yellow, and you weren't helped here by the lack of colour. So you weren't helped by the lack of colour, but we've got the blue one and the yellow one. So of the blue, I've got 3/4 of that. If that's 90 degrees there, I've got 3/4 of the 100 are diseased. So that's going to be 75 diseased. And with this one, I've got just that bit there which are diseased. So with 90 sheep, I've got this amount. Now that amount there has to be 160, because that's 200 degrees there. So it's 160 out of 360 which are diseased. So I can simplify that down. I can do that. Then I can divide by 4. So that gives me 4/9. So 4/9 of 90 of these are diseased. So 4/9 of 90 is 40. This doesn't look right, does it? I've made a mistake here somewhere, guys. So it appears that there are more blue which are diseased by 35 and not by 25. But it could be something to do with the way this is photocopied. So I believe the mark scheme had this is correct. Obviously, you can see the difference is 35 as long as my working out is correct. Okay, question 29. This one's a bit confusing, but basically, with this kind of travel graph, this is the distance in meters away from a point. So they go a total of 60 meters away from the point, and then a total of 60 meters back. So the total distance traveled is 120 meters. 60 meters there, 60 meters back. And I'm going to divide that by the number of seconds it took, which is 60 seconds altogether. And that's just going to give me 2 meters per second. Question 30. Which of the following is the correct Venn diagram? 13 of the 26 students like comedy films. 16 of the 26 students like science fiction films. 5 of the 26 students like both types of films. So, I mean, all of these, I've got 5 in the middle, so that doesn't help me to narrow it down, except for the fact that it can't be that one, because these 5, this doesn't, that's not really the way we tend to write it. It doesn't make much sense. Now, this one here is the one which most people made a mistake with, because if 13 of the 26 students like comedy films, well, if you chose this one, there's actually 18 people liking comedy films there. There's 13 that only like comedy films, plus the 5 who also like science fiction. So it's not this one. This does produce 13 liking comedy, and it does produce 16 liking science fiction. And then 5 liking both, and there's 2 who don't like either, which is fine, but it's definitely this one. Because these are the ones that need to add up to give 13 and add up to give 16. Right, section B, question 1. This one most people got right. It's just how many 1/5 do you need to get 1 3/5? Well, 1 3/5 is the same as 8/5. So how many 1/5 do you need for 8/5? You need 8. Okay, so this is section B, question 2. And this is a complete correction, so green pen, nice and clearly. I just need to think about this situation. It's a number times by 2 1/4. A number, I'm going to call it x for now. You don't have to call it x, but whatever number times by 2 1/4, and the answer, or it's equal to 3. So a number times 2 1/4 equals 3. Well, what you guys need to realize is that this is this gives you related division facts. If this was just, let's say, 6 times 2 equals 12, well, I could do 12 divided by 2 to give me 6. If this was 9 times 3 is 27, I could just do 27 divided by 3 to give me 9. Related division facts, in just the same way as with your times tables. So, to find out what this number is, I just need to do 3 divided by the 2 1/4, and that will give me that missing number. So it's now going to test your ability to do a division with a mixed number. So you should know that the best way to do this is to turn that mixed number into an improper fraction. 4, 8, 9/4. Okay, so 3 divided by 9/4 is the same thing as 3 times by 4/9. Okay, because we're going to use that multiplicative inverse. Okay, when we're dividing by a fraction, we turn it into a multiplication and we use the reciprocal. So 3 times by 4/9 is 12/9. Remember, 3, I'm just going to multiply by the numerator because this is the same as 3 over 1, or 3 wholes. So 3 times 4 will give me 12. The 9 stays the same. So 12/9 is the same as 1 and 3/9, which is the same as 1 and 1/3. And that's my answer. 4 marks there. So I'm going to set you guys an improvement question and or an extension question.